Welcome, Alex. I'm so glad you decided to take this step toward improving your English fluency. Before we dive in, tell me, what's your biggest challenge when it comes to speaking English?
Thank you for having me, Sarah. Well, my main problem is that I always translate everything in my head first. When someone speaks to me in English, I translate it to my native language, think of the response in my native language, and then translate it back to English. It makes me so slow, and sometimes I lose the flow of the conversation completely.
That's actually one of the most common challenges I hear from students, and you're absolutely right to address it. This mental translation process is like taking the long route to your destination every single time. Today, we're going to explore how to create direct pathways in your brain so you can think in English naturally. The goal is to bypass that translation step entirely.
That sounds amazing, but is it really possible? I've been learning English for years, and this habit feels so ingrained.
It's absolutely possible, and I've seen countless students make this transformation. The key is understanding that thinking in English isn't just about language. It's about rewiring your brain's neural pathways. Think of it like learning to ride a bicycle. At first, you had to consciously think about every movement, balance, pedaling, steering. But eventually, it became automatic, right?
Yes, exactly. I don't think about how to ride a bike anymore. I just do it.
Perfect analogy. That's what we call developing automaticity. Your brain creates shortcuts for frequently used processes. The same thing can happen with English thinking. Let me ask you this. Do you ever dream in English?
Sometimes, actually. And when I wake up, I'm surprised because in the dream, speaking English felt so natural.
That's fantastic. Your subconscious mind is already capable of processing English without translation. Dreams prove that your brain can operate in English mode. We just need to train your conscious mind to access that same ability while you're awake.
So, how do we start? What's the first step?
The first and crucial step is what I call inner voice training. Right now, that little voice in your head, your internal monologue, probably speaks in your native language, correct?
Yes, always. Even when I'm preparing to speak English, I'm thinking in my native language.
We need to gradually shift that inner voice to English. Start with simple, everyday thoughts. Instead of thinking, I'm hungry in your native language, think, I'm hungry in English. When you see a red car, think, red car in English, not in your native language.
That seems simple enough, but I imagine it requires a lot of conscious effort initially.
Exactly right. Initially, it will feel forced and unnatural, like writing with your non-dominant hand. But here's the beautiful part. The brain is incredibly adaptable. Neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity. Every time you choose to think in English instead of translating, you're strengthening those English neural pathways and weakening the translation pathways.
How long does it typically take to see results?
It varies from person to person, but most students start noticing changes within 2 to 3 weeks of consistent practice. The key word here is consistent. You can't practice this once a week and expect dramatic changes. It needs to become a daily habit, ideally something you do throughout the day.
Can you give me some specific techniques to practice this inner voice training?
Absolutely. Let me share my top 5 techniques. First is what I call narrating your day. As you go about your daily activities, describe what you're doing in English in your mind. For example, I'm brushing my teeth. The water is cold. I need to buy new toothpaste.
That makes sense. What's the second technique?
The second is emotional labeling. When you feel emotions, identify them in English. Instead of your native language word for frustrated, think, I feel frustrated in English. Emotions are processed in a very deep part of the brain, so connecting them with English words creates powerful associations.
I never thought about emotions being connected to language learning. That's fascinating.
It really is. The third technique is visual thinking in English. When you see objects around you, immediately think their English names. Don't let yourself think the native language word first. See a bird? Think bird. See clouds? Think clouds. This trains your brain to directly associate visual input with English vocabulary.
This is starting to make a lot of sense. What about the fourth technique?
The fourth is problem solving in English. When you encounter any kind of problem or decision during your day, work through it mentally in English. Should I take the bus or walk? The weather looks nice, so I'll walk, but I need to leave 5 minutes earlier. This is particularly powerful because problem solving engages multiple areas of your brain simultaneously.
And the fifth technique?
The fifth is English self-talk for motivation and planning. Instead of giving yourself pep talks or making plans in your native language, do it in English. Come on, you can do this. Or tomorrow I need to finish that report, call my friend, and go grocery shopping.
These all sound very practical, but I'm worried about making mistakes when I'm thinking. What if I think something incorrectly in English?
That's a common concern. But here's the thing. Making mistakes while thinking is actually part of the learning process. Your brain will naturally self-correct over time. Plus, when you're thinking, there's no pressure, no judgment, no one else listening. It's the perfect safe space to experiment with the language.
That's reassuring. Now, let's talk about speaking practice. How does thinking in English actually improve my speaking?
Excellent question. When you think in English, you eliminate the translation delay I mentioned earlier. Your thoughts are already in English, so when it's time to speak, the words are readily available. You're not doing two separate processes, thinking and translating. You're just expressing thoughts that are already in English format.
So the speaking becomes more fluent naturally.
Exactly. Plus, there are additional benefits. Your sentence structure becomes more natural because you're not imposing your native language's grammar patterns onto English. Your vocabulary recall becomes faster because you're practicing retrieval constantly throughout the day. And your confidence increases because you're not struggling to find words. They're already there in your thoughts.
This is starting to sound almost too good to be true. Are there any specific speaking exercises that complement this thinking practice?
Definitely. One of my favorite exercises is stream of consciousness speaking. Set a timer for 2 minutes and just talk out loud about anything. Describe your room, talk about your day, share your opinions on a topic. The rule is you cannot stop talking and you cannot use your native language even if you don't know a word.
What do I do if I don't know a word during this exercise?
Great question. You describe it. Use simpler words or even make something up. The point isn't perfection, it's fluency and training your brain to stay in English mode even under pressure. If you don't know the word refrigerator, you might say the big white box where we keep food cold.
That's actually a good strategy for real conversations too, isn't it?
Absolutely. Native speakers do this all the time when they can't think of a specific word. Another powerful exercise is shadowing. Find English audio, podcasts, audiobooks, news, and try to repeat what you hear immediately after the speaker says it. This trains your brain to process and produce English sounds simultaneously.
I've heard of shadowing before, but never tried it consistently. How does it help with thinking in English specifically?
Shadowing forces your brain to operate entirely in English mode. You're hearing English, processing it, and immediately reproducing it. There's no time for translation. It's like intensive training for your English processing circuits. Start with slower, clearer audio and gradually work up to normal conversation speed.
What about reading? Does that help with thinking in English?
Reading is crucial, but the way you read matters enormously. Most language learners read English text, but still process it through their native language understanding. Instead, try to visualize what you're reading directly in English. When you read, "The tall man walked quickly down the street,"
Create that visual image in your mind while keeping the English words, not translating to your native language equivalent.
So I should try to understand the English directly rather than converting it.
Exactly. This is called reading for meaning in English. Also, try reading out loud sometimes. When you vocalize English text, you're engaging both your visual and auditory processing, which strengthens your English thinking pathways.
Speaking of auditory processing, what about listening practice? How can I use that to improve my English thinking?
Listening is fundamental because it feeds your brain with natural English patterns. But again, the approach matters. Instead of listening and mentally translating, try to understand directly. Start with content slightly below your current level so you can focus on direct understanding rather than struggling with vocabulary.
Any specific types of listening material you recommend?
I recommend varied content to expose your brain to different contexts and vocabulary. Podcasts are excellent because they're conversational and natural. YouTube videos on topics you're passionate about work well because your interest helps maintain focus. News broadcasts are good for formal language, and TV shows or movies help with casual, everyday expressions.
What about music? I love listening to English songs.
Music can be helpful, but with a caveat. Song lyrics often have unusual grammar and word order because of rhyme and rhythm requirements. Use music as supplementary material, not primary learning content. However, if you enjoy it, try to understand the story or emotions in the songs directly in English without translating.
Let's talk about some practical challenges. What should I do when I'm in a real conversation and I feel my brain defaulting back to translation mode?
This is going to happen, especially in stressful or important conversations. When you catch yourself translating, take a brief pause if possible. Take a slow breath and consciously shift back to English thinking mode. It's like remembering to maintain good posture. You'll need to remind yourself consciously until it becomes automatic.
What if the person I'm talking to speaks very fast or uses words I don't know?
This is where strategic communication skills come in. Instead of panicking and reverting to translation, stay in English mode and use phrases like, "Could you repeat that?" Or, "What does blank mean?" Or, "I'm not sure I understand." These keep you operating in English while buying you time to process.
That's much better than freezing up or switching to my native language if the other person speaks it.
Exactly. Another strategy is what I call English approximation. If you can't think of the exact word, describe the concept using the English you do know. This keeps you in English thinking mode and often leads to learning the correct word when the other person understands and provides it.
You mentioned earlier that emotions play a role in language learning. Can you expand on that?
Absolutely. Emotions create stronger memories and associations. When you experience positive emotions while using English, joy, excitement, satisfaction from successful communication, your brain creates positive associations with English thinking. This makes it more likely you'll default to English mode in the future.
So I should try to make my English practice enjoyable?
Yes, but also recognize that some frustration is normal and even beneficial. The key is managing it. When you feel frustrated with your English thinking progress, acknowledge the feeling in English. I feel frustrated, but this is part of learning. This actually turns the negative emotion into a learning opportunity.
That's a really interesting perspective. What about cultural thinking? Sometimes I feel like I think about concepts differently in English versus my native language.
You're touching on something profound here. Language and culture are deeply connected. English might express certain concepts or relationships differently than your native language. Embracing this difference, rather than trying to force your native cultural patterns into English, will actually improve your English thinking.
Can you give me an example of what you mean?
Sure, different languages have different ways of expressing politeness, directness, time concepts, or relationships. English might be more direct in certain situations where your native language is indirect. Instead of thinking, how do I say this polite thing for my culture in English? Try thinking, how would an English speaker express this sentiment?
So I need to not just learn the language, but also understand how English speakers think about things?
You're getting it. This is why consuming authentic English content is so important. Books, movies, podcasts, and conversations with native speakers expose you to English thought patterns, not just English words and grammar.
Let's talk about some common mistakes or obstacles. What do you see students struggling with most when trying to develop English thinking?
The biggest obstacle is impatience. Students expect immediate results and give up when they don't see rapid progress. English thinking develops gradually, and there will be days when it feels like you're going backward. This is completely normal. Learning isn't linear.
What other obstacles should I be aware of?
Another big one is perfectionism. Students worry so much about making mistakes in their thinking that they revert to their comfort zone of native language thinking. Remember, making mistakes while thinking is completely private and safe. Use this mental practice time to experiment and take risks with the language.
Are there any specific times of day that are better for practicing English thinking?
Great question. I recommend starting your day with English thinking. When you wake up, instead of immediately thinking in your native language, consciously switch to English mode. Plan your day in English. Think about your goals in English. Starting the day this way often makes it easier to maintain throughout the day.
What about before sleep?
Evening practice is excellent too. Review your day in English, what went well, what you learned, what you want to do tomorrow. Some students even try to fall asleep thinking in English, which can influence your dreams and subconscious processing.
You mentioned neuroplasticity earlier. Are there any other brain science concepts that can help me understand this process better?
Absolutely. Understanding a bit about how your brain learns can be very motivating. Your brain has something called the reticular activating system. It's like a filter that notices things you're focusing on. When you commit to thinking in English, your brain starts noticing English everywhere and creates more opportunities to practice.
So the more I focus on English, the more English learning opportunities I'll notice.
Exactly. You'll start noticing English signs, overhearing English conversations, remembering English words you heard earlier. Your brain becomes tuned to English input, which accelerates your learning.
What about the role of repetition? How much practice is enough?
Repetition is crucial for building neural pathways, but it needs to be spaced out over time. It's better to practice English thinking for 10 minutes 6 times throughout the day than for 1 hour once a day. This concept is called spaced repetition, and it's much more effective for long-term retention.
That makes sense. It keeps the English pathways active all day instead of just during one intensive session.
Exactly. And here's another important point. Variety in your practice prevents your brain from getting too comfortable with one type of English thinking. Mix up your inner voice training, speaking exercises, and listening activities.
Let's talk about measuring progress. How will I know if my English thinking is actually improving?
There are several indicators to watch for. First, you'll notice reduced translation delays in conversations. Second, you'll catch yourself naturally thinking in English without conscious effort. Third, your English dreams might become more frequent or complex. Fourth, you'll feel less mentally exhausted after English conversations because you're not doing double processing.
Are there any specific milestones I should aim for?
I like to think of it in stages. Stage 1 is conscious English thinking. You have to remind yourself to do it. Stage 2 is semi-automatic. You slip into English thinking naturally sometimes, but still need conscious effort. Stage 3 is automatic. English thinking happens naturally in English-speaking environments. Stage 4 is dominant. You sometimes find yourself thinking in English even when you don't need to.
How long does it typically take to reach each stage?
It varies greatly depending on your current level, practice consistency, and immersion opportunities. With daily practice, most students reach stage 1 within 1 to 2 weeks, stage 2 within 1 to 2 months, and stage 3 within 3 to 6 months. Stage 4 can take 6 months to several years.
That gives me a realistic timeline to work with. What about maintaining motivation during this process?
Motivation is crucial because English thinking development requires consistent effort over time. I recommend keeping a learning journal where you note daily observations about your English thinking practice. Celebrate small victories. The first time you catch yourself naturally thinking in English, the first conversation where you don't translate, the first English dream.
Should I set specific goals for myself?
Absolutely. But make them process goals rather than outcome goals. Instead of, I will speak perfectly in English, try, I will practice inner voice training for 10 minutes every morning. Or, I will have one conversation this week where I try to minimize translation. Process goals are more controllable and less intimidating.
What about getting feedback on my progress? Since thinking is internal, how can I get external validation?
Great point. While thinking is internal, it affects your external performance. Record yourself speaking English regularly and listen for improvements in fluency, reduced hesitation, and more natural rhythm. Also, ask trusted English speaking friends to note changes in your conversation style over time.
Before we wrap up, are there any final tips or strategies you'd like to share?
Yes, first, be patient with yourself. English thinking is a skill that develops over time, like learning to play a musical instrument. Second, make it fun and personally relevant. Think about topics you're passionate about. Third, don't be afraid to make mistakes in your thinking. No one else can hear them. And finally, remember that every moment you choose to think in English instead of translating, you're literally rewiring your brain.
This has been incredibly helpful, Sarah. I feel like I have a clear roadmap for developing English thinking skills. My biggest takeaway is that it's not just about language learning, it's about training my brain to operate differently.
That's exactly right, Alex. You're not just learning English, you're developing a new cognitive skill. With consistent practice and patience, you'll find that English thinking becomes as natural as riding that bicycle we talked about earlier. The key is to start today, start small, and stay consistent. Your future English speaking self will thank you for the effort you put in now.
Thank you so much for all these insights and practical strategies. I'm excited to start implementing them and see how my English fluency improves over the coming months.
You're very welcome. Remember, every expert was once a beginner, and every fluent English speaker had to train their brain to think in English at some point. You have all the tools you need now. It's time to put them into practice. Good luck on your English thinking journey.